Welcome the anointed ones. Some people don't wake up when the alarm rings. They wake up when the illusion collapses. This message isn't for everyone. It is for the ones who unknowingly became someone else's worst realization. Because there is a difference between a personal awakening and a collateral awakening. Yours didn't just change you, it forced clarity onto people who were never ready for it. And that clarity, it was brutal. Here is a fact most people don't like admitting. Psychological studies show that the human ego experiences more distress when proven wrong than when experiencing failure itself. Failure can be blamed on circumstances being exposed, that is personal, that is permanent. And that is exactly what happened to your enemies. They didn't just lose ground. They lost the story they told themselves about who they were in relation to you. They assumed your struggle meant inferiority. They mistook your patience for ignorance. They confused your restraint with a lack of awareness. And when life didn't break you the way they confidently predicted, something ugly happened inside them. Not anger, not jealousy, confusion. The kind that makes people replay conversations at 3 a.m., the kind that forces quiet people to suddenly become very loud, and loud people to go strangely quiet. The brutal part. You didn't announce your growth. You didn't demand acknowledgement. You didn't even pause to explain. You simply kept moving, and that movement rewrote the entire power dynamic without asking for permission. That is when the awakening hit them. Not all at once, but in waves. Every time they checked on you and couldn't find the downfall they were waiting for. Every time their predictions aged badly, every time your absence brought them more discomfort than your presence ever did. And let's be honest, there is a darkly humorous side to this. Nothing humbles a person faster than realizing they invested emotional energy into monitoring someone who was too busy evolving to notice. That is a return on investment. Nobody brags about. This isn't about revenge. It is about revelation. It is about what happens when someone survives the narrative written for them and accidentally becomes a mirror nobody asked for. Your enemies didn't wake up because you attacked them. They woke up because you didn't collapse. And for people who built confidence on your supposed failure, that realization wasn't just uncomfortable. It was the most brutal awakening they never saw coming. Number 1. Your survival exposed the lie they built their identity on. For years, they quietly built a story around you. A story that made them feel superior, untouchable, and in control. They needed to believe that you were weak, limited, or destined to fail, because their entire sense of power rested on that assumption. Their identity wasn't just about who they were, it was about who they thought you weren't. Every insult, every subtle sabotage, every calculated move was designed to reinforce their illusion that they were on top and you were beneath them. They never realized that their entire framework depended on your collapse. And when you survived everything they threw at you, their carefully constructed world came crashing down. Suddenly, the invisible pedestal they built for themselves was gone, and they were left standing on a foundation of lies. The brutal awakening hits hardest because it is personal. It is one thing to fail, to stumble, to be caught off guard. Those are incidents that can be explained away. But surviving in full clarity, in full strength, exposes not just your resilience. It exposes their dishonesty with themselves. Their identity, which they so meticulously polished, was nothing more than a reflection of a false hierarchy. Every smug comment, every manipulation, every calculated act of control is now seen as desperate, small, and irrelevant. They thought their power was earned. In reality, it was borrowed from the assumption that you were weaker than you truly were. When they see you standing, unbroken, unshaken, and fully aware, the shock is immediate. It is as if someone tore the mirror off the wall leaving them staring at their own vulnerability. The truth of their own mediocrity becomes undeniable. The people who built their sense of superiority around your supposed failures are forced to confront the reality. They are not above you. They are not untouchable, and they never really understood what they were up against. Your survival isn't just a win for you. It is a revelation for them. And that revelation, it is the kind that leaves a permanent mark. It is uncomfortable. It is humbling. And it is the exact kind of awakening they didn't see coming. In that moment, the lie they lived by, the story they told themselves, collapses. And all they are left with is the raw, undeniable truth of your existence. 2. They woke up to the fact that you were never naive, you were restrained. All this time, they thought they had you figured out. They mistook your patience for ignorance, your silence for weakness, and your observation for gullibility. Every subtle move they made, every scheme they plotted, they assumed you hadn't noticed. They assumed your lack of immediate reaction meant you were unaware, unprepared, or incapable of understanding the full picture. That assumption became the biggest mistake of their lives because what they saw as naivety was never that at all. You weren't blind to their actions, you weren't oblivious to their intentions, and you certainly weren't powerless. You were restrained, calculating, and fully aware. The awakening for them is brutal because it hits where pride and ego are most vulnerable. People who build themselves up by undermining others thrive on the illusion of superiority. They need to believe that their manipulations are secret, that their schemes go unnoticed, and that their targets are weak enough to bend to their will. When they realize you were never naive, the illusion shatters. Every plan they thought was foolproof suddenly looks sloppy. Every move they thought was clever now seems transparent, and the realization that you were watching it all unfold while holding back leaves them unsettled, scrambling, and unsure how to operate around you. What makes it even more piercing is the patience behind your restraint. They expected you to react quickly, emotionally, and predictably. Instead, you let events unfold, letting time expose their weaknesses and let their own behavior reveal the cracks in their character. That restraint wasn't passive. It was power disguised as calm, and the moment they realized it, they understood that they had been dancing inside someone's awareness the entire time without even knowing it. The worst part for them is that this restraint is ongoing. You are not impulsive, you are not driven by vengeance, and you are not reliant on their behavior to dictate your next move. Your awareness is your armor, your restraint is your strategy, and their shock is the proof that they underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. They woke up to a truth that cannot be taken back. You were never naive, and now there is no turning the tables. You have already controlled the narrative silently from the start. 3. Your calm became proof that they were emotionally unarmed. They thrived on chaos. They depended on stirring storms, provoking reactions, and feeding off the turbulence they created around you. Every time they tried to push, manipulate, or intimidate, they expected a response. A crack, a flare, a moment of panic. That reaction would have confirmed their dominance and reinforced the fragile belief that they were in control. But you didn't play that game. You stayed calm, collected, and unshaken. That calm wasn't indifference. It was quiet mastery, and when they realized it, the awakening was nothing short of brutal. The truth they faced is harsh. They were emotionally unarmed against someone who could endure without collapsing. All their tactics, all their power plays, all their attempts to destabilize you relied on you reacting the way they imagined. When that reaction never came, it exposed the emptiness behind their so-called strength. Their confidence was never based on real resilience. It was based on the assumption that you would respond the way they wanted. Your calm demolished that assumption, leaving them exposed, confused, and vulnerable in a way they never anticipated. What makes this even more devastating for them is that calm has a contagious power. While they burned themselves out trying to provoke you, your composed presence magnified their weaknesses. It highlighted how reactive they were, how dependent on external chaos their sense of become. They realized too late that emotional endurance isn't something you can fake or demand. It is something you live, develop, and embody quietly while the world rages. And the cruelest part for them is that your calm wasn't an act or a strategy to prove a point. It was a natural extension of who you are. They had been counting on their ability to manipulate circumstances, but you never needed the drama. Your presence alone revealed their instability. Every frantic attempt they made to assert control only confirmed what they feared the most. They were unprepared for someone who could withstand everything they threw and still remain untouchable. That realization is unforgettable, piercing, and utterly humbling. And it is the exact kind of awakening they never saw coming. They realized you don't need chaos to feel powerful, and they do. Your enemies thrive on turbulence. They believe that power is loud, aggressive, and dependent on external validation. They stir drama, manipulate situations, and feed off the reactions of others because it gives them a sense of importance. Their confidence, their identity, and even their self-worth are tied to creating disruption and watching people struggle within it. They assumed the same formula would work on you. They expected that if they pushed hard enough, provoked enough, and controlled enough, they could destabilize you the way they do everyone else. And when that didn't happen, the awakening was violent. You don't operate that way. You don't need the chaos to feel alive. You don't need people reacting to your moves to confirm your value. Your power is internal, built through endurance, clarity, and the quiet strength of understanding yourself. It isn't performative. It doesn't require validation. You don't seek to dominate others because your life isn't a competition for attention or status. That distinction is what terrifies them. They are trapped in a world where their importance is conditional. Without drama, without reactions, without control, their identity feels fragile, incomplete, and exposed. The brutal realization for them is that their entire framework for power is temporary, reliant, and predictable. They build mountains on sand while you exist as a force independent of circumstance. Your presence alone, composed, deliberate, self-contained, becomes proof that true influence doesn't come from noise or manipulation. They finally understand that, while they are dependent on chaos to assert their relevance, you are untethered from it, moving with purpose, clarity, and stability that cannot be shaken by their tricks. And that truth stings. Every attempt they make to provoke, every subtle attack designed to destabilize you, falls flat. Every maneuver they consider clever is revealed as nothing more than desperation. The awakening hits them hard because it is undeniable. Their power is borrowed, conditional, and fragile, while yours exists regardless of their interference. You have never been playing their game. You have been operating on a level they cannot even reach. And that realization leaves them unsettled, humiliated, and painfully aware of just how dependent they are on the very chaos you effortlessly rise above. 5. They finally understood you were studying them, not competing with them. For all their efforts, your enemies never realized that you weren't engaged in a contest they could win. They believed every look, every word, every pause, and every decision of yours was about them, about outdoing them, proving them wrong, or matching their schemes. That assumption kept them overconfident, reckless, and dangerously comfortable in their sense of superiority. What they didn't see, what they never anticipated, was that your focus wasn't on them at all. You were studying them, observing them, mapping their patterns, motives, and weaknesses. Every move they thought was secret. Every plan they assumed was hidden, was quietly noted, processed, and stored for a moment that only you could control. The moment they realized this, the awakening was brutal. Predators panic when they discover they were being watched and analyzed the entire time. All the energy they spent plotting, manipulating, and controlling was revealed as wasted effort. They assumed the game was one of offense and defense. But in truth, you had been taking quiet notes while they were performing for you, unknowingly giving away everything they thought was a strategic advantage. Their sense of control crumbled because they understood too late that you weren't competing on their terms. You were operating on a level entirely of your own making. What makes this realization even harsher is that they now see how powerless their tactics really were. Their schemes, meant to destabilize you, now exist as evidence of their transparency. Every manipulation, every attempt at intimidation, every emotional play. It all became data for you, insight for future moves, and confirmation that they were predictable. The shock of knowing they were the ones performing in someone else's awareness, while thinking they were dictating the narrative, is disorienting and humiliating. Your enemies woke up to the uncomfortable truth that they were irrelevant to your strategy. You weren't reacting to them, you weren't proving anything, and you certainly weren't playing their game. You were simply observing, learning, and preparing. That realization leaves them exposed, shaken, and painfully aware that their obsession with controlling you never mattered because you were always several steps ahead, silently understanding them in ways they will never understand themselves. Your consistency embarrassed their strategy. They built their plans on the assumption that you would react, that you would falter, that you would be predictable. Every scheme, every manipulation, every subtle attempt to provoke a response was designed with the expectation that you would crumble, snap, or at least show some sign of weakness. Their confidence was built on the fragile belief that inconsistency defines people, that unpredictability is a weakness to exploit. What they didn't account for was that you operated from a place of unwavering consistency. You didn't bend to their whims, you didn't stumble in response to their chaos, and you didn't allow their emotional games to alter your state of mind. Your calm, steady approach made their elaborate strategies look clumsy, desperate, and amateurish. The awakening for them is harsh because consistency isn't flashy. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand attention, and it certainly doesn't validate their sense of control. But it is powerful in a way they could never mimic or manipulate. While they were cycling through drama, distractions, and manipulations, you stayed the same. Every attempt they made to destabilize you failed, not because of confrontation, but because you refused to let their tactics dictate your behavior. That refusal exposed their methods as primitive. Their confidence, which relied entirely on your expected reaction, crumbled the moment they realized you had none. The embarrassment is compounded by the fact that consistency is not something they can force or fake. No amount of manipulation or planning can create someone who operates from internal stability and clarity. They are forced to confront the reality that all their clever moves were wasted energy. Every time they tried to provoke a response and got none, their power diminished. Every strategy they thought was foolproof became evidence of their desperation and inability to understand the person they were up against. Your enemies experienced a profound realization. They cannot manipulate someone who does not bend, who does not react, who does not let their chaos dictate behavior. Your consistency didn't just defeat their plans. It embarrassed them, stripped them of confidence, and revealed the emptiness behind their so-called strategy. In their eyes, what they thought was control is now exposed as futility, and that is a wake-up call no one forgets. Number 7. They woke up to the fact that your absence didn't weaken you, it strengthened you. They assumed distance would be your undoing. They believed that removing themselves from your immediate life, creating separation or isolating you in some way, would chip away at your strength, undermine your confidence, and leave you vulnerable. That assumption was their first mistake. What they didn't realize is that your absence from the chaos, from the manipulation, from the constant scrutiny, was never a disadvantage. It was an advantage. Being away from their noise gave you space to think, clarity to strategize, and perspective to understand the patterns they were too blinded to see. Every attempt they made to control or diminish you through distance ended up having the opposite effect. It sharpened you, honed your focus, and made your presence more formidable than ever before. The awakening hits hard because it completely reverses the narrative they were clinging to. They had been expecting your absence to signal weakness, but instead it became proof of resilience. Their belief that proximity equals influence collapsed. They understood too late that you don't require constant interaction or engagement to maintain power or presence. Your growth, stability, and self-possession were not dependent on them being near or their validation being available. They discovered, painfully, that your absence stripped away distractions, removed unnecessary conflict, and allowed you to operate without interference. Something they never anticipated, and it is humiliating for them because the more they tried to see you as diminished, the clearer it became that their relevance was shrinking. Every action they took, every move they thought was strategic, was now nothing more than a futile attempt to reach someone who had already evolved beyond the stage they controlled. Your absence became a mirror, showing them their desperation, their dependency, and the fragility of their ego. The brutal truth they had to face is simple. Removing yourself from toxic influence doesn't make you weaker, it makes you untouchable. While they were focused on creating space to destabilize you, you were using that space to fortify yourself. Their shock, embarrassment, and fear were the natural result of seeing someone thrive in the very conditions they assumed would break them. In the end, your absence wasn't a void for them to exploit. It was a force that revealed their irrelevance and your undeniable strength. Number 8. Your growth forced them to confront their stagnation. While they were busy trying to keep you small, distract you, or control you, you were quietly evolving. Every setback they thought would break you, every trap they set to limit you, only became a catalyst for your growth. They didn't notice it happening day by day because they were so wrapped up in their schemes, assuming the world revolved around their expectations. But the reality is, your life continued to expand, your awareness deepened, and your strength multiplied, all while they stayed in the same patterns, repeating the same behaviors and expecting different results. The brutal awakening hit when they realized that while time passed, they were still stuck in the same cycle, clinging to illusions of control and hoping for validation from external chaos. Your growth didn't just show them your resilience. It highlighted their stagnation. They had built their identity on being clever, manipulative, and dominant. Yet watching you rise silently, steadily, and strategically forced them to confront the uncomfortable truth. They hadn't moved at all. They were still operating from fear, insecurity, and outdated assumptions, while you had already left their world of influence far behind. The contrast was glaring, undeniable, and humiliating. Every attempt to provoke you, to sabotage your progress, or to remind you of limitations became a reminder of their own inertia. What makes this awakening truly painful is that it cannot be ignored or disputed. Growth is visible in presence, in results, and in the way someone carries themselves. They could try to spin narratives, make excuses, or blame circumstances. But your evolution wasn't dependent on them. It didn't need their acknowledgement or permission. Their fear and frustration were amplified because they understood deep down that your progress wasn't just temporary or situational. It was permanent, rooted in your resilience and clarity, qualities they had never developed. In the end, your enemies faced a harsh truth, while they remained stuck, watching and wishing you moved forward. Their stagnation became a mirror reflecting everything they failed to cultivate, and your growth became the measure of their irrelevance. It wasn't just an awakening for them. It was a brutal, undeniable indictment of their inability to evolve while you soared. 9. They realized you don't seek justice. You outgrow the need for it. They spent years expecting a fight, a reaction, a public display of anger or revenge. Every slight, every betrayal, every attempt to undermine you was calculated to provoke a response, something they could point to as proof that you were human, flawed, and most importantly, controllable. They wanted the satisfaction of seeing you scramble, of watching you lose your balance and validate their efforts. What they didn't anticipate, and what became their harshest awakening, is that you don't operate on the same scoreboard. You don't seek justice because your power doesn't come from punishing them. It comes from transcending the need for retaliation. Your victories aren't about proving them wrong. They are about becoming untouchable, untethered, and fully aligned with who you are. This realization is devastating because it removes the stage they thought they owned. For someone whose identity relies on manipulation and control, nothing is more terrifying than knowing the person they tried to break doesn't need to play the game at all. You didn't retaliate, not because you were weak or fearful, but because you had already moved beyond the cycle they were trapped in. Every insult, every scheme, every attempt to provoke became meaningless because your attention, your energy, and your growth were no longer dependent on their behavior. That is a brutal truth for anyone who thrives on the chaos they create. The person they thought would bend, react, or suffer simply didn't. The most painful part for them is the permanence of this outgrowth. Unlike revenge, which is temporary and reactive, transcending the need for justice is proactive and enduring. You aren't waiting for validation or acknowledgement. You aren't seeking to win against them because their attempts to harm you no longer have the power to influence your trajectory. Your focus is on building, growing, and evolving in ways they cannot disrupt or control. When they finally see it, they understand that their efforts weren't just ineffective. They were irrelevant. Your rise isn't tied to their fall, and your evolution doesn't depend on their awareness. You don't just survive their schemes, you outgrow the need to respond, leaving them frustrated, exposed, and painfully aware that they were never part of your real story. Your self-trust exposed their dependency on external validation. Your enemies built their confidence on other people's reactions. Every insult they hurled, every manipulation they attempted, every strategy they devised relied on someone else bending, reacting, or acknowledging their power. Their identity depended on applause, attention, and the chaos they could provoke. That is why your self-trust became their nightmare. You weren't feeding into their narrative. You weren't seeking their approval, defending yourself, or bending to fit the image they wanted of you. Your confidence wasn't borrowed, performed, or conditional. It was internal, steady, and unshakable. That difference is what triggered the most brutal awakening. They watched, frustrated, as all their efforts fell flat. They expected you to waver, to question yourself, to seek answers from the very people who tried to control you. Instead, your self-trust acted like a mirror, reflecting their dependence for all to see. Every attempt to provoke doubt or manipulate reality failed, leaving them exposed. It is a unique kind of humiliation to realize that your power isn't tied to anyone else's perception, while theirs collapses without constant reinforcement. What made it even worse for them is that self-trust isn't something they can fake. You cannot manufacture it by controlling others, orchestrating reactions, or spreading influence. It has to be lived, built through experience, and fortified by clarity. That is why they were forced to confront a truth they could never fully embrace. They are fundamentally dependent on external forces to feel significant, while you operate entirely from within. Your confidence, decisiveness, and calm presence make their efforts look frantic, hollow, and desperate. The awakening is harsh because it leaves them powerless in a way they aren't used to. They cannot manipulate you into insecurity, fear, or reaction because your foundation doesn't rely on them. And the irony that stings the most is that everything they thought would weaken you, scrutiny, sabotage, or emotional warfare, only reaffirmed your inner strength. Your enemies had been playing a game based on borrowed influence, and your self-trust exposed them as fundamentally unarmed, dependent, and incapable of destabilizing someone who never needed their validation in the first place. 11. They understood too late that you were built for long games. Your enemies operated on immediacy. They thrived on quick wins, instant reactions, and visible results. Every plan they crafted was designed to deliver fast outcomes, every move calculated to provoke immediate responses. They assumed that life, like their schemes, could be won in a series of rapid strikes. What they didn't realize is that you play on a different timeline. You are built for long games. Every action you take, every decision you make, is measured, deliberate, and part of a strategy that spans far beyond the surface level skirmishes they are so obsessed with. That slow, patient approach became their worst nightmare because it exposed the fragility of their impulsive methods. The awakening for them is devastating because it forces them to confront the difference between temporary advantage and enduring strength. While they were chasing short-term victories and celebrating small, fleeting manipulations, you were quietly laying the foundation for outcomes they couldn't anticipate. Your patience, discipline, and vision became proof that real power isn't flashy. It is sustained, deliberate, and invisible until the moment it manifests. Their arrogance, based on speed and reaction, made them blind to the depth of your approach. And when the effects of your long-term strategy became apparent, it was like the rug had been pulled out from under them. What makes this realization even harsher is that long-game thinking cannot be rushed or replicated. You don't need to fight their battles on their timeline. You observe, calculate, and act only when the moment serves your broader plan. Their frantic attempts to destabilize you became irrelevant because they couldn't comprehend that your moves weren't reactive. They were inevitable. Every setback they tried to create for you only became a stepping stone in your design. The harsh truth they faced is this: while they rely on immediate gratification and visible control, you are patient, calculated, and resilient. By the time they recognize the extent of your influence, the long game has already been won. Their strategies, their impatience, and their illusions of superiority crumble, leaving them stunned, powerless, and painfully aware that you have always been operating on a level they will never reach. Number 12. Your refusal to internalize their projections dismantled their control. Your enemies thrived on labeling, defining, and projecting. Every insult, every rumor, every manipulation was designed to make you internalize their version of reality, to absorb their judgment, carry their shame, and live according to their expectations. They believed that controlling your perception of yourself was the key to controlling you. What they didn't account for is that you never took their projections inside. You refused to make their opinions your truth, their lies your identity, or their narratives your reality. That refusal became the exact force that dismantled the control they thought they had over you. The awakening for them is brutal because it strikes at the foundation of their power. People who manipulate, deceive, or dominate others rely on the assumption that their targets will internalize the energy thrown at them. They need their victims to absorb the narrative, to doubt themselves, to react emotionally, or to seek validation. When that doesn't happen, when someone stands firm in their own understanding of themselves, all the energy they invested in manipulation becomes irrelevant. The truth is revealed. They never had power over you. They never truly influenced you. Every attempt to shape your reality was wasted because you refused to live inside the story they were telling. What makes this realization even harsher is that their projections now act like a mirror, reflecting their own insecurities, failures, and desperation. Every accusation they made, every lie they spun, and every tactic they used comes back to show their fear and lack of control. While they assumed dominance through your compliance, they now face the undeniable truth that they were powerless the entire time. Your refusal wasn't passive resistance, it was active clarity. By refusing to internalize their projections, you not only preserved your own integrity, but also revealed the fragility of theirs. Their awakening is harsh because it is undeniable. The control they believed they had was never real. You have always operated independently of their influence, and that realization leaves them exposed, frustrated, and painfully aware that their attempts to dominate you were nothing more than noise against the strength of your self-possession. They finally grasped that you don't need to be understood to be effective. Your enemies assume that clarity equals control, that understanding someone fully gives them leverage over that person. They spent energy analyzing you, decoding your moves, and trying to predict your reactions, believing that if they could understand you, they could dominate you. What they failed to realize is that your effectiveness doesn't rely on their comprehension. You don't operate for their benefit, validation, or approval. You act with purpose, strategy, and precision, whether they understand you or not. That truth is what shattered their illusion of control and delivered the most brutal awakening. The realization hits hard because it overturns the narrative they built around themselves. They believed that influence comes from knowledge, from predicting reactions, from forcing outcomes. They thought every calculation, every manipulation, every attempt to corner or provoke you would yield results if they understood the mechanics of your behavior. But you aren't operating in their game. Your moves aren't designed to be decoded, your choices aren't made for approval, and your results aren't contingent on their perception. The more they try to grasp your methods, the more frustrated they become, because they are trapped in the false assumption that understanding equals control. What makes this awakening even harsher is that it is permanent. Unlike temporary setbacks or miscalculations, your independence from their understanding cannot be undermined. They cannot dictate your actions, predict your strategy, or diminish your impact simply by observing, analyzing, or theorizing about you. Every effort they made to assert dominance through insight only highlighted their inability to grasp the depth of your focus, clarity, and purpose. The painful truth they face is that effectiveness is rooted in alignment, intention, and self-possession, not in how well others comprehend you. Your enemies are forced to confront that no amount of observation, decoding, or scheming can make you less capable. They see the results, they witness the movement, but they cannot connect the dots because your actions are not designed for them. They are designed for the reality you are creating. That realization leaves them powerless, humbled, and painfully aware that understanding you was never the path to control. Number 14. Their awakening was brutal because it revealed you were never fighting them. You were becoming yourself. For years, your enemies believed the battlefield was external. Every insult, every manipulation, every attempt to provoke a reaction made them feel like they were engaged in a contest with you. They thought the struggle was about winning against you, breaking you, or proving dominance. What they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was that the real battle was never with them. The struggle was internal, a journey of becoming, growing, and evolving into the person you were always meant to be. That truth hit them like a thunderclap when the results of your self-mastery became undeniable. The awakening is devastating because it completely dismantles the framework they relied on. They invested time, energy, and strategy into influencing your behavior, but they were never a factor in your transformation. Every attempt to control or destabilize you failed not because of luck or circumstance, but because you were focused on alignment with yourself, not competition with them. Their schemes, their judgments, and their manipulations were never a threat to the trajectory you were already set on. That realization forces them to confront the fact that all their efforts were irrelevant, that the power they thought they held over you was an illusion, and that your growth and evolution were independent of their awareness. What makes this awakening even more humiliating is the permanence of it. They cannot undo your transformation, cannot reclaim influence, and cannot reinsert themselves into the process of your becoming. You moved through the world with clarity, resilience, and purpose that didn't require their acknowledgement or intervention. Every reaction they expected, every stumble they anticipated, never came. And in watching this, they are forced to face the uncomfortable truth. They were never your opponents. They were spectators, and their significance in your life was always marginal. In the end, their brutal awakening is a mirror reflecting their irrelevance. You weren't reacting to them. You weren't proving anything, and you weren't seeking validation. You were simply becoming yourself. That reality leaves them stunned, frustrated, and painfully aware that they were never at the center of your story. You were, and always have been, fully aligned with your own power, your own path, and your own evolution. The journey of a world, or seeking validation from those who doubt you, it is about the quiet, relentless cultivation of your strength, your clarity, and your truth. Every point we have explored shows a single, undeniable reality. Your enemy's most brutal awakenings didn't come from your words, your actions, or your attempts to defeat them. They came from who you became while they were busy trying to contain you. Your survival, your restraint, your calm, and your self-trust exposed their weaknesses. Your consistency, your patience, and your long-game thinking highlighted their stagnation. Your growth and refusal to internalize their projections revealed their reliance on borrowed power. And the most piercing truth of all is that you were never fighting them. You were becoming yourself, fully, unapologetically, and inevitably. Every attempt they made to manipulate, provoke, or control you became irrelevant, because your power was rooted internally, not externally. They thought the world was a battlefield where they could challenge you, but the real battlefield was your own evolution. And while they scrambled in confusion, watched in frustration, or tried desperately to reclaim relevance, you moved forward, untouchable, unshaken, and fully aligned with your destiny. Their awakening was brutal, not because you sought vengeance, but because your very existence revealed the fragility of their illusions. It is the quiet, invisible victories, the kind that aren't noticed, until it is too late, that are the most devastating. This is the mark of the chosen ones. Every struggle, every challenge, and every scheme they aimed at you only made you stronger, wiser, and more unstoppable. They learned, often too late, that real power doesn't need to be flaunted, understood, or validated. It simply exists and transforms everything around it. You have already become the person they underestimated, and that reality will continue to shift the world in ways they cannot comprehend. If this message resonated with you, if you felt the weight and truth of these awakenings, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights that cut deep and reveal reality as it is. Like this video, comment below with your thoughts or experiences, and share it with anyone who needs to understand the unstoppable force of becoming themselves. Your journey is your power, and the world is only just beginning to witness it. God bless you.